This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms.
Okay, Sam, thanks for being on the podcast. Appreciate it. Um,
Yeah.
why don't you tell me what kind of got you into this community and what happened to you initially?
So I've had a background of problems with my stomach and reflux for about 20 years. I was prescribed proton pump inhibitors, quite a large dose. And then I went back to my doctor because they weren't working, and I was prescribed a drug called metoclopramide, which in America is known as Reglan. And I took that for a while on and off, but by about the 40th tablet, I experienced a acute reaction. I developed akathisia straight away. I developed dystonia, twitching in my muscles.
Wow.
And pretty I was sort of already involved in the mental health community because I was training as a counsellor, and I was describing these symptoms, and they signposted me to people in the community pretty rapidly, which I was quite grateful about. So that's how I got involved. Because before this drug reaction, I know absolutely nothing about akathisia or dystonia or any of those things, or that they're even possible from drugs.
Yeah. I know once you told me about Reglan, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like it's for GI issues, but the way the drug acts is a little bit different than what you would suspect, right?
It is, yeah, because it's got a similar action to an antipsychotic, even though it doesn't have any antipsychotic effects. It's still a dopamine antagonist, which is the same class of drugs that antipsychotics fall into. So, I mean, I think that's what catches people out a lot with Reglan, because they think it's like a sickness drug or a stomach drug, which is what I thought. I was a bit annoyed really when I found out it was basically a rebranded antipsychotic.
Was there any way
Like,
for you to know that ahead of time? I mean, it wasn't in the literature, it wasn't disclosed to you. I imagine, like, if you did a lot of research, you would have known, but
I mean, the side effects were disclosed in the patient information leaflet. But I suppose unlike a lot of people, you go to the doctor, you just you get ill, which I thought was was on the stomach. And I didn't really think that much about it. Just, so yeah, it was only when I started researching like the mechanisms that I realised it was a rebranded antipsychotic. And obviously, having worked in mental health for many years, I realised antipsychotics are quite powerful drugs. And because I've got a long history of drug reactions as well, and so don't think I would have taken it or agreed to take it had I known.
yeah, it would have been quite different, right? Like your considerations, I would think might be a lot different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of a hard question, but do you remember what it was like getting the akathisia and like such severe symptoms at that point? I can imagine it was a surprise, but I'm curious.
Yeah, it was so I mean, this is one of the things that, because somebody asked me what the difference between anxiety and akathisia was, and I thought, if you have to ask that question, then you don't know, you haven't had akathisia, because it was totally different to anything that I'd experienced prior. I was 40 at the time, and I never experienced anything like it. So it's like, if you've got like sensory pain I'd describe it as sensory pain. So like if you've got like like sensitive teeth, that's different to pain. You've got that sensation throughout the whole nervous system and in your brain. And you've also got this like potential energy, and it's got nowhere to go. And
Yeah.
that's throughout your nervous system as well. So I think that's what it causes like the restlessness. And B, it also causes the suicide feelings, what it did for me anyway, because with pain, it's sort of isolated in one area of your body. With akathisia, it's all over your body. So you sort of, if you could just hop out of your body for a minute to get some relief, I think you would do that. Obviously, you can't. So your brain's a bit odd. So when you've got akathisia, and I think, so you sort of get thoughts like, I just have a minute to escape, and you can kind of get into suicidal thinking that way. It's very odd.
Yeah, when I first experienced it, it's like I was experiencing so much internal sensation, like it had nowhere to go. It felt like I was gonna like explode. Like that was the big difference between like super severe anxiety and then experiencing this. Like I just constantly felt like I was gonna like blow up. It was like I didn't understand how my brain and nervous system and my emotions could even process like what I was experiencing. Um,
I don't think they can, and I think that's part of it. Like you've got no language for it either. Yeah. So I mean, that's a good. It's like you've got that energy's got nowhere to go,
yeah.
and I found that if I tried to suppress moving, then they come out in involuntary movements for that reason. And also there was like what I describe as like a screaming alertness.
Yeah.
So like I was not tired for 2 years, even though I wasn't sleeping. And that was just absolute torture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so long. I think I had about 6 months of it. And that was, I mean, it's all relative, I guess. Like people make it a really long time with it. But when you think about going through that for that long, like 2 years, like that is so long. Um, can
Yeah,
you
a few minutes is long enough, isn't it?
exactly right? Like it's almost like there's no difference. Like 2 years and 2 minutes, it feels the same.
Yeah.
Even though obviously like for me 6 months, I can't even imagine 2 years, but I mean there's some kind of comparison, but when you're in it, yeah, it just feels like an eternity is like minutes or seconds.
Yeah, so I'd say it was at my worst for 2 years. I still have mild flares now after 5 years.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting because I, when I first experienced it, I was really at a loss to understand it. And I was quickly struggling to try to understand or have some expectation. But I have flares now too. If I eat like sugar or have certain triggers, apparently it builds up and then it'll kind of pop off. And I was curious if other people kind of had the same thing or you experienced the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think so at first because I think it was so high that basically it was like trying to hear a single note in an orchestra. Um, but, but when my symptoms diminished a little bit, then I started to notice like specific triggers, like you say, like sugar, gluten, dairy, so all inflammatory triggers really. And I know because at the time I was following you on, and your post kept popping up on Facebook with these, the FDA reports of the TMS. I kept noticing things being paired to me like anxiety, suicide, insomnia, and I thought, well, those are sort of code words for akathisia. If you've never heard what akathisia is,
Yeah.
that's how people would describe it with the language that they've got, even though it's nothing like anxiety. So that's how we started speaking about your experience of akathisia from TMS, which is kind of quite interesting since you've never read what akathisia is.
Yeah.
Um, and it kind of, because the doctor once said to me, you read about these symptoms and then you've spontaneously manifested them. I'm not so like it just, doctors throw a lot of things at you, I think. And so for me, for you to have that experience of having read of akathisia and for our symptoms to be exactly sort of concordant, like you explain that overwhelming sense of energy with nowhere to go. Yeah, really interested in the different mechanism as well, like the drug versus the physical harm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very funny watching. Well, it's not funny at all, but like watching, not knowing what it is, and then watching other people describe it. I have the same thing now. It took me a while to figure it out, but then watching people try to describe things that they don't have a word for, you kind of catch on and see. It's really interesting, especially in the case of akathisia, I think. I know. So how did you handle that? I think you have you're the most knowledgeable person I've ever met on the subject, and you helped me tremendously understand what I was going through. And then, I mean, you sent me like paper or, studies and information on how it can be just from a brain injury. It doesn't necessarily have to be from psychiatric drugs. That was one thing I think that happened to me, is that I thought it only came from psychiatric drugs at the time because I had heard of it, but and then when I was experiencing it, I was kind of sure of myself, but I thought there was this disconnect between what I had, because mine was a brain injury from electrical treatment, and then like a drug induced like akathisia. So
Yeah, I mean, I remember sending you that paper as a result of you explaining your experience, because like you said, once you've experienced it, it's pretty unmistakable. And there's certain things, like you can read about in the literature, a sense of restlessness. That doesn't go far enough to explain or warn people about the severity of the side effects and how you can be fine one day and then wanting to end your life the next. So how did I cope with it? I sort of had really an optimistic outlook from the get-go. I'd experienced other drug side effects and they'd always diminished. And I was like, oh, it's getting better. Whether that was denial
yeah,
or just like a brief window in my symptoms. But I think, the windows were really important in terms of building optimism, building resilience, resting, looking after yourself. Because when the next wave hit, you would need all of that, to starting from a more negative place would be more difficult than to cope with the akathisia. The other thing that I looked at was you can be, because it's so unpredictable and it fluctuates so much, it can be quite intense, and then you think, oh, you're getting better, and then you have another intense wave. I tended to look at the symptoms over a longer period of time. It's a bit like looking at those during COVID, where they were looking at trends over the rather than say just hour to hour. And so then I could see that it was very gradually getting better.
yeah,
And that helped me to ground myself. I think my search for looking through all these papers and stuff, even though it hasn't helped me understand what akathisia is, it's brought up some more questions than answers. That helped me kind of feel like I was doing something.
yeah. You're like building your knowledge base, like you feel like you're moving towards something at least.
Yeah, it sort of gives you, because it's such a traumatic experience as well, it sort of gives you some sense of control or some sense of grounding in, that you're moving towards finding out whatever you can do to help yourself.
Yeah.
So that was helpful as well. Even though nothing came of it, my kind of it piqued my interest as well in terms of, like trying to find out why this had happened to me, and sort of looking at the bigger picture around that as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me, the more I learned and the more it kind of normalized things, like, hey, this is a real thing. People are experiencing this. I'm experiencing this. It's from my brain injury, from TMS. Like it, it allowed me to kind of work through the trauma, I think, as I was experiencing it. And then I mean, it's again, and the positivity and working through that, it helped me get through the day to day. Instead of initially, I was like so traumatized having experienced it. I was just like, it felt like it was just so alien. It felt like just something just exploded, and I just happened to randomly be there, but it's not anything that makes any sense. Um, it was a really, really wild experience. And I think a lot of people associate those are the kind of thoughts people have when they think of medication withdrawal or like antidepressant withdrawal or like a severe withdrawal syndrome. They automatically think of like, before I experienced it myself, I knew that people going through it went through something really bad. And I think that's what I kind of pictured, was like something so bad words really don't describe it. And then ironically I ended up experiencing it. I mean, like, yeah, that's what it was, or that's what I pictured.
Yeah, it's words don't do justice, really. Yeah, but I think it should be a household name
Yeah.
among medical professionals, and a lot of people that I do meet in the course of my personal and professional life, I do speak about it, whether they believe me or not. There's a chance that somebody might be saved by that discussion. So whether they believe me or not is sort of irrelevant. Or
I've
at
had
least they've heard the word.
Yeah, I've had to describe it to every single one of my physicians that I see, and then
Yeah,
every person that I wanted to have an honest conversation with, because people are like, "How are you doing?" And I'll be like, "Honestly, like this is what I'm dealing with." And I'm glad that I have a term that I can use that they'll remember, but yeah, describing it to them and then telling them what it is it's kind of a heavy conversation, but yeah, I had to have it with everybody. Like otherwise there's no way they could understand, exactly what was going on.
yeah. I was the same. I took in printed sheets of the description of Akathisia to my doctor, and she said, "Oh, I know what it is, but it's unlikely because it's so rare." Um, and then I was just like, even if it is rare, it's associated with this drug, and I'm experiencing something I've never experienced before, and it totally fits the description.
Yeah.
So, she and from the outside, I think it does look like anxiety, which is confusing, but from the inside, it's
Yeah.
nothing like. And she said, "But it's anxiety," and I lost at that point with my doctor, and she threw me out. But in terms of thinking, you have to explain it to every physician is quite scary, considering like some of the large groups have got. So the largest group has got 750,000 hits per month,
That's
and I just think, and once you go into those groups, it's like the truth unmasked, like you say, because you think, oh, this is so awful, nobody else could be experiencing it, and then you've got hundreds or thousands of people in them groups explaining exactly the same symptoms,
yeah.
explaining the timeline, explaining that it's not that rare, that it lasts for a lot longer than the drug manufacturers say that it does.
Oh yeah.
A lot longer.
I
Which
found
is
that
really,
really interesting in the community in general. It seems like whenever you hear about withdrawal syndrome, like people are trying to convince me that like it's a couple weeks or like a couple months at the most, and I'm like, I consistently see it lasting like much longer than they're talking about, and it's, it makes
I
it
think,
all
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
ridiculous.
I think the average number is about 4 years. Because
Wow.
I was consistently seeing people hit 4 years and then be a lot better in the. That was in the group I was in where people had akathisia from drugs, but a range of drugs. So not just antidepressants, not just antipsychotics, but things like birth control, antibiotics.
Yeah, I've seen it across a really large class of drugs as well, which was it was a surprise and then it wasn't a surprise, I guess, you know. But that's the other problem, right? Like, and then you're in a class of drugs. Like, if someone takes an antibiotic, they would not think that they're going to experience like a severe psychological experience like that, and then so they can't describe it. So they're acting
Mm.
erratically and like kind of crazy from something that they wouldn't expect. And then if their physician's probably going to get involved at some point, or their community, their family, and all that stuff. And if they can't describe it, it makes them look batty, which is really, a problem, because it's legitimate, because of legitimate biological response to, like, the I mean, without going into a lot of detail and the different things that happen, but like a serious drug or a serious change in the body, from,
Mm.
a prescription drug, which they all have really serious impacts, and they could all seriously augment the nervous system, which I think could cause akathisia depending on, the circumstance.
So I mean, I describe it really as an injury rather than an adverse effect, because
Yeah.
I think that's part of the difficulty in the language with when you're talking to doctors, because I think they see it as transient because it's a drug side effect. I see it more of a drug injury, and
They kind of put it where they want it, right? Like, they just
yeah,
wiggle the language around because there's no exact science behind it to make it as comfortable as they want it to feel, but it's not.
no, I wish it wasn't exact science, because then that would make things a lot easier for us. Because obviously all your tests come back normal, your brain scans come back normal, and then what do you do with that? Like if there was if there were studies, and I've read hundreds of papers on akathisia and have not found any sort of study that I would explain akathisia using actual data or explain any sort of causal relationship. So if we knew what it was and we had diagnostic tests to diagnose akathisia, the doctors could see it, then they would just take all this sort of opinion, their opinion of what you're experiencing. We know what we're experiencing, but they have an opinion of what we're experiencing, and because they've got nothing to grasp hold of diagnostically, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a big contributor. And unfortunately, there's this huge gap I see in in the medical profession around inducting experiential evidence. Like, it seems to be very hard for them to do that. They always try to keep it at arm's length and minimize it, even if they see it consistently over and over and over again. And I think that's a big roadblock to, like, understand the reality of what's going on and really treating your patients well. It's like, you got to believe your patients. You're going to have to believe that they're being completely honest and accurate with you and they're not exaggerating. Like, I always seem to get this minimization, like, from my doctors in the past. Like, I've found some good ones now, but it's because I'll fire any ones that don't listen well, or I think they don't believe me, because that minimization, like, really creates a problem, you know?
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah, it's difficult though, because I think until you've experienced akathisia, it's very difficult to understand how bad it is,
Yeah.
how what the experience is like, because and having no language for an experience like that, because like I said, I didn't experience anything like it until I was 40. So it was like reborn, because I had to relearn everything that I thought I knew about my body as well. I had to relearn because it completely changed. That's really difficult as well. So basically, I felt like I did a lot of neuro rehab at home because I received no help. So it's just things like redoing the things that I did before. No matter how painful it was, no matter how difficult it was, and just doing that, like going back to work with Akathisia.
Yeah.
Fun. But no, quite important, I think, in terms of rehabilitation, and also having sort of like a sense of myself in this sort of whirlwind of like my body totally is unrecognizable, but I'm still me because I'm still doing my work, and it sort of gives you like some kind of straw to hang on to.
Yeah. I can really identify with that. Ever since I went through kind of the most recent hardship, like kind of reevaluated the way like I look at myself and the way I do things, because like this serious fear of it happening anywhere at any time, like, has kind of started to govern the way I think and the way I act. And I'm like, I need to re-examine, what I think I can and can't get through based on the new criteria, which I mean, it sounds trivial to someone that hasn't experienced it, but it's traumatic. Like, it affects everything. Like, I completely reevaluated my life through that process, which was a good thing on one hand, but on the other hand, like, I was kind of redefining myself and what I think I can do and what I think I can get through and what's important also.
Yeah, it's scary at the level that we can get through, but you can get through it. We've both been through it. I have people message me all the time saying they can't do it, they can't get through it. You can get through it. You just have to get through it the best you can, even if that's not very pretty. It's not going to be, because it's very distressing, to say the least. So yeah.
Yeah, I started having hard conversations with people that were really close to me, telling me what I was going through and how it felt. It felt like I was not going to make it. Felt like I was going to die. And then, just kind of moved on from there. And I think I also knew that I had to build up this mental toughness and kind of practice it. Like, you get through one day and it's like, okay, I got through yesterday. I know I'm tough enough to make it through another day. This may go on for a really long time. So, I have to kind of have this methodology of being positive and just doing things that'll get me through. And I have to know when I can shift away from just getting through into doing. I mean, we all have responsibilities or things that we need to do, or obligations to family or ourselves. And then it's like there's this moment where I'm like, no, okay, like I have to go into like emergency management mode where like I'm just trying to survive moment to moment, and I can do that, but I need to focus on, just trying to relax. Sometimes I just go lay down because I couldn't do anything. Like, I felt like something bad was going to happen to me no matter if I did anything. So I just lay down in bed and be as calm as I could and as positive as I could, and like I could get through. And then like the next morning or whatever, or maybe a few hours later, I'd be like, okay, I think I can go do the dishes or whatever, and I kind of came up with this dichotomy of what I could and couldn't do and when and why. And it was a big shift, but sometimes it would catch me unawares, like it would ramp up quick, like if I was under stress or a trigger. And that felt the most dangerous to me. Like when I didn't know what to do because I was kind of caught off guard. I'd be like, I don't know, should I go lay down or should I do this or that? And then, it just it felt all like this big emergency. And I haven't landed in the emergency room with it, but I know lots of people that have. And I always wanted to avoid that. And I think maybe that contributes. Like, people don't know what to do, but they feel obviously the worst a human being could possibly ever feel in my mind,
Yeah.
and then you end up in the ER and then on involuntary commitment or something, and that it does
Yeah.
not help anything.
Or being given more drugs that can cause akathisia, and you can end up in a very, very vicious cycle and a very, very bad place. I mean, as bad as my akathisia was, I think I knew people that it was worse. That was always my fear that, I'd rather, if I was surviving it and sort of semi-coping with it, then, I wouldn't do anything to rock the boat, because it was knife edge anyway. So I certainly wouldn't try something that could potentially make akathisia worse. I mean, I did have some failed experiments with what I considered to be lower level drugs like antihistamines and stuff that ramped up my akathisia really badly. And like supplements like zinc or 5-HTP. I got ramping up my serotonin was a good idea. I know what I was thinking. I must have been out of my mind.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, I remember doing that, and I was like, failed experiment. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I learned from that even sort of substances that I thought were relatively benign, it was a bit like having sunburn and you go for a hot shower, where previously that wouldn't have really hurt. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that reactivity, or rubbing salt into wounds, or
Yeah.
that's sort of how I experience a lot of that sort of stuff.
I had that. Even stuff that had been safe for me before became
Yeah.
unsafe and would trigger me. So
Mm.
it's very problematic. And I got to the point where when I felt like I was vulnerable or I was starting to ramp up or I might have an episode or a trigger, I would not take anything. Like I would just eat really clean and relax. Like don't I always think like, oh, I'll take something to calm me down, or something that maybe like antioxidants got me, like CoQ10 was one. Like I couldn't take the ubiquinone like on it. It would trigger me, and I was like, man, this should really be helping, and
Mm.
sure
I
enough,
know, because
a
that
lot of
came
stuff
about.
did. So
Yeah, that came about from our discussion, didn't it? Because I'd found that really helped me, and I'd actually linked it to some of the literature as well. So I'm a bit more cautious about what because it's like a situation where one man's meat is another man's poison. I think the hypersensitivity is, just generalized hypersensitivity is the really diagnostic of akathisia.
yeah,
But the things that cause that hypersensitivity, or the things that you react to, are very different, and between individuals, and that's why I'm sort of cautious about recommending stuff, because you
yeah,
kind of have to sort of, the best way I found was like getting right down to a baseline, and just adding tiny bits of substances in to see how you reacted, to get, and whether you reacted consistently to the same trigger over time, to get
it's
a sense
hard.
of.
It's hard because everyone wants a quick fix, like they're in an urgent situation. They just want
Yeah.
out, they want to know what will work. But really, like the key is to be patient and to figure out what works, and not to make any mistakes by just jumping on board with something and taking a lot of anything, or taking a lot of risks.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I've seen people harmed from doing that, and people that are no longer here from doing that. And it's understandable, because akathisia is so distressing that
Yeah.
like you suggest something and they'll instantly go and buy, like the highest dose tablet or whatever, because they want relief,
Yeah,
instant relief.
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's feel some kind of responsibility to actually not do that. But just share what's helped for me has been more sort of elimination.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about relaxing, because I cannot relax with akathisia.
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, yeah, there's a positional element to it. You know, like if I'm lying down, it's worse.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, like I had to find. At one point, I was Googling how to sleep standing up.
Oh man. So do you try to keep yourself busy? Is that how you handle it? Or do you
When I had it, yeah, I sort of tried to keep myself busy. I tended to have this sort of. Some people get like an inversion of their 24-hour circadian rhythm, so you be alert and awake at night instead of during the day. But my akathisia would be ramping up in the evening and all through the night, and then during the day it was fine.
gotcha.
So I was working during the day but not sleeping. I had, it's interesting as well, because you know, like all of my colleagues, we work with people with health difficulties and mental health difficulties. We're all very experienced. And so my colleague actually saw me have an attack of akathisia in the car, and he said, "That's not anxiety. It's like you're being tortured." And I said, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah.
I know. I know. And he said, "Is there anything I can do?" I said, "No, nothing. Just don't touch me." You know, because I wasn't just hypersensitive to substances. I was hypersensitive
Yeah.
to touch, to noise, to light.
Yeah. Stimulation.
Yeah, any kind of stimulation that sort of set off my sensory nervous system was like
I noticed that too. Just recently, I was really focused on the triggers that I could kind of figure out, like dietary things. But then during that period, I had kept my stress level really, really, really low. But just recently, over the last month, I can't remember what happened, but I had a really significant stress event that came on like all of a sudden. And like I started getting triggered and I could feel it coming on. And I had like a night where I didn't sleep because it was right there. Like I had the internal sensation and it was, it was just so close. Like, and it was just from stress. And I was really surprised. I hadn't really identified that experience before, but essentially it kind of changed the way I think about it. And that I may have been lucky where I minimized those triggers when I was going through it because I was so sensitive about my lifestyle at the time because I didn't want to take any risks on anything. But I I think if I would have gone out to loud places because of my TMS injury, I already knew that I couldn't handle any stimulation. So when I started getting the akathisia, like that was already completely a no-no. But I could totally see that happening. And that's problematic. That's hard to deal with, especially if people don't understand that. Light, sound, emotional stress, those are all potential triggers for our nervous system to totally go off the deep end if that's what we're experiencing.
Yeah, and I think because I went off the deep end with a theory about stress and the vagus nerve. So I mean, I did vagus nerve stimulation, because
Yeah.
you can buy the vagus nerve
Oh
stimulator.
yeah,
You
I've
can
heard
buy
quite a
that
bit about that.
go through your ear. Yeah, I mean that actually made my akathisia a lot worse. I
Wow.
convinced somebody with akathisia to do it as well, and that made them worse as well. Not significantly worse, but if something ramps you up, you just stop it straight away.
Yeah.
And I also took some probiotics that latch onto your vagus nerve, and that made me, my akathisia just went through the roof. I was sort of really confident they would help me, you know what I mean? I thought, it's not even a drug.
Yeah.
It's just bacteria, and you just think, oh my God, so what, like it makes you think, like, what is actually going on here? Because you've got that's what I've learned as well. You know, like you can engage with a theory and you can kind of latch onto it and be really sort of convinced that you know you've got the answer right there. And I was sort of convinced that those things might help me. Well, they made my akathisia worse. So it's like an anti-placebo experiment. So, and that's why I sort of hold theories really lightly now. I sort of think, well, that might be an explanation, but there's no proof. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't sort of go, you know, like galloping towards it, going, oh, you know, like I've absolutely found the answer. Because I've also done a lot of testing for different things. Because you're convinced as well that you've got something really bad. You might have some rare disease.
Yeah.
And not all of your tests come back negative, and you're like, with and that's also about treatment as well, isn't it? You know, like because you're desperate for treatment. So if it's something else other than akathisia, that'd be great because you know you might have a treatment, you might get some relief. So yeah, that's another thing that I've learned as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know we were talking before about how the medical profession is kind of opinion based when we think it's science based. And it was
Mm.
really cool to hear your thoughts on that. I know that comes like with these things, like when we see a doctor and we talk to them about it, we tend to think that they're coming back from the scientific background or they're really immersed in the literature. But you know, you go to one doctor and they have one opinion, you go to the next one and they have the next one, and it's almost impossible to get like reliable, you know, treatment. What's your
Mm.
experience been with that? What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, that's how medicine works. I mean, it's in the language, isn't it? You know, you go to a doctor for a second opinion, even in things that are really well defined, or you know, battery of diagnostic tests associated with them, or the interpretation of scans that you've got is different between different practitioners. So you don't get a good experience with one doctor, so you go to a doctor for a second opinion. And there's always opinions on treatments. I mean, my experience, my sort of thoughts about that is it is problematic. There's like I think the human body's inherently complicated for that. It's like a series of best guesses. But also, I mean that's a problem with akathisia because there's no diagnostics, so you know it gets even more opinion based. Then you know it comes down to an opinion of your movements, which in my experience can be highly variable. I watched a video quite early on because I had quite significant abnormal movements as well. At times I lost the ability to speak. I had episodes of jaw locking. I had quite significant, you know, Parkinsonism as well. But I watched this video, and there's this woman who had been on antipsychotics for years for treatment of psychosis, and she developed what the psychiatrist described as tardive dystonia.
Yeah.
And then that those movements involved the whole of the body.
Wow.
So he said that she was suffering from axial dystonia, and he described movements as chorea at one stage. And I was thinking, well, what is it? Is it, you know, because if you went to a neurologist and he said I've got chorea from drugs, they'd sort of like absolutely, because like their definition is really narrowed now, you know. So like if you watch that video, you know, like it's whole body dystonia. He's which did respond actually to, she tried clozapine first, which didn't work, but then she was put on Biserpine. And the psychiatrist who treated her said, you know, like this isn't a treatment. It's just that it's controlling her symptoms, because when she came off the drug, her symptoms returned.
Just return. Yeah. Oh man.
So that's a phenomenon I understood as like drug masking. But in terms of opinion, so doctors' opinions now on drug side effects, although it's mainly in your face. So they describe a syndrome called orofacial dyskinesia. And I wonder how that has changed from like this woman that I was watching in the video, where it was totally accepted that those were drug side effects and responded to a drug that masks the symptoms, which is known, other drugs that can cause akathisia can also be treatment, but it's paradoxical.
Yeah.
And often, like you're just getting this drug masking, you hit a point and you sort of then falling from a higher height with it, which is really dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's interesting in sort of really looking at how the opinions changed and narrowed over time, so that that so that's why I say I want a diagnostic test. If there
Yeah.
was like a big test where you say we've definitely got akathisia or not, and it was against people who were describing those symptoms, and it came back like 100% of them had that mark or whatever, that'd be great. Because then, like, I think opinion would still be in it because that's where medicine is, but it would be less opinion based. It would be less based on an opinion of your movements, their opinion of your movements.
Yeah.
So that was fine in 1990, but it's not fine now. It's very, very, very narrowed.
Yeah.
Very narrowed down.
And I think and they're not even getting the full breadth of the information. Like they're not in your body experiencing these things. So, I mean, they're giving you an opinion that's not really science-based or evidence-based lots of the times, and they're not even getting critical information from you even. And so what I found is like you have to assert yourself in the situation where you're having an equal hand in what's going to happen, and an equal hand in the the diagnosis and how we get to the diagnosis. Like I have to do my thinking for my doctor. Like I have to be like, did you think about this and that? And then can we do these kinds of tests or those kinds of tests? And what really shocked me is that most of the time, like they agree with me. There are things they're not doing. There's things they're not considering. And like I have to kind of force the issue. And I think maybe a big thing is time. Like doctors don't want to spend the time on you. You have to kind of force them to consider your situation more seriously, be be objective, and then spend the time and the thought on it, because they're not going to do that inherently. Generally, there's a few good doctors out there that'll do it, but they're exceptionally rare, like way less than a fraction of a percent. So you have to be invested because you're responsible for your outcome. Your doctor's not. Like if you get hurt, your doctor's not living that down for you. He's probably going to drop you as a patient and you're going to be on your own, and then so the breadth of the opinion of a doctor is like, I'm really surprised, and I know you really got this when we talked before, but it's really like it's like a flippant opinion. Like they'll look at a few things and be like, oh well, let's try this, and it's all medical treatments are dangerous. That's why you have to go to a professional to get it, and so these flippant opinions are they're really dangerous. And I think being a patient is difficult too, because there's a lot of effort you have to put out on your own behalf. You cannot just trust the doctor. It's absolutely reckless. But that's not the standard. The standard is just go to your doctor, just tell him your problem real briefly, and he's going to fix it for you, or at least render an opinion or diagnosis and treatment that has a good chance of working. But in my experience, that's not really the case. And the more I've learned about medicine, I've realized that a lot of the treatments and stuff aren't very evidence based either. It's like, oh, we found a marker that means like you have this certain kind of infection, and then you realize that the marker could mean a lot of different things, right? And it's not
Yeah.
just, what's the most likely, but they don't
Mm.
discuss that with you. And if you don't look yourself, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's why I say medicine's like a series of best guesses. I think there are some things that are very, very well defined, like diabetes, and the treatments for that work very well. But there are other things that are very, very woolly. And I think it's that woolliness that I think is associated with the level of risk that you should be taking.
Yeah.
So, for something like akathisia that isn't very well understood, nobody even knows what causes it. People have massive problems with the treatments that are offered,
Yeah.
and that they often make akathisia worse, and they end up in a worse situation when they were already desperate. And I've seen a lot of suicides as a result of that in the groups. So, I mean, my experience with my own doctor was that he'd come with a theory about me, and then he set about doing a set of tests which confirmed his theory of me. And in the UK, I can't. I'm not entitled to a second opinion. I'll have
Wow.
to go private. And obviously, if you've been disabled by this, then your funds are limited. People don't have health insurance in the same way that they do in the States.
Yeah.
So,
But I think we ended up kind of with a similar conclusion that unfortunately the safest bet is to not participate in the medical system, like, because there's a really high amount of risk every time you engage in anything, even the simplest thing. um I mean, like physical therapy, and there's a few things. I mean, rehabilitation services and therapy, I think generally are pretty good. Like, there's a good chance you're going to gain something from it, and there's really little risk. But the pharmacological and device-based interventions are really risky. And for me, I would rather deal with whatever I'm dealing with, whether it's a condition, a disease, or harm from something else, than take a chance on a treatment. Really, the doctors I see now is I just consult with them to try to understand and get an idea of what's going on and get someone else's opinion. But like my doctors, they always offer me drugs when I'm in there. And I'm like, no, like it's not going to happen. And they're like, okay, well, I just wanted to offer it. And then that's a weird transaction, right? Like he kind of feels like a drug dealer, it's like, oh, you don't want any relief, or it's so okay, I guess.
I suppose, yeah, I suppose it's their theory of akathisia from whatever training they've had, whatever textbooks they've read, whatever studies they've read. Which I've said I've read hundreds of studies, and it hasn't meshed with my experience or the experience of other people in the groups. So, what are those studies worth? So you instantly coming from going into that doctor's office, you're instantly coming from a totally different perspective, because your views, your values, and beliefs on this particular subject have been completely and radically changed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like if you learned, I mean, like I learned from other people's experience as well, that because I'd watch them try all this stuff, and then they'd be worse, and then people be committing suicide and stuff, and you'd be like, okay, a note of caution is warranted, like a bucket full of caution. Um, so
I think that's another
yeah.
big benefit from the communities, is that everyone's really concerned with trying to figure like just do something to help themselves. But
Mm,
the big thing about the communities is that if you're just kind of patient, like you can learn a lot from others, and we can learn a lot from each other, which
mm,
it seems simplistic, like just talking about it now and common sense, but you don't see a lot of that. A lot of people are just kind of trying to rush to figure out their individual circumstances, but reading through stuff and trying to learn from others has been really huge, especially for me. I don't have a lot of like money to try treatments, right? But some people do, and I can read about their experiences or talk to them and see
Yeah.
how it went and try to inform myself a little bit better. And it could be really beneficial.
Yeah, and I think because something they're describing is so consistent with your experiences, that when you see them kind of falling down these rabbit holes and these black holes, and after 5 years, I'd have to say I'd see quite a lot of that. You do sort of learn to be more cautious, and
Yeah.
I think as I've said to you before, there's thousands of people in a group that are really, really desperate for relief, and they've tried everything under the sun, and they've not found something that's really worked. I think there was 2 people in a group of 2,000 that I was in, that found something that worked for them. So like if there was something that like, this is the cause, this is the treatment, we would have found it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could put your hands on like an over-the-counter prescription or a supplement, we would have found it,
Yeah.
but we haven't found it. And go around the groups like wildfire, wouldn't it? People would be running down to the so yeah, I just so that I agree with the learning from other people's experiences, and but trusting your own experience as well, because your experience of Akathisia is slightly different to mine. But you trusted your gut. You've got to trust your gut.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
you've got to trust yourself. You've got to trust and listen to what your body's trying to tell you. And between you and your body, you kind of like figure it out.
Yeah, I think I learned that fairly early on, but that's been like the biggest lesson. Like again, we've talked about, and you just said like thousands of people, and there's no one answer. Like the answer is you're gonna have to find your answer, and that's really going to be guided by your gut. Like there's a time where I thought like you could just be intelligent and like come to some deduction or read up all the literature, and then you're like, oh, I figured it out. Like that's not going to be it either. It's going to be some variant in there, and your individual biology, your individual circumstances is going to determine that. So you got to follow your gut to get there. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly because I got a research degree, and that's exactly the approach that I took in the beginning. I was like, oh, I'll just read about it, and quickly come to a solution. How wrong I was with that. Yeah, but I mean, I don't think the wisdom of that group collective can be underestimated. Really,
Yeah,
I owe a lot of them my life, and like bravery for trying things before me that didn't work, and to share that in that group is you know humanity. That's humanity right there.
yeah,
Empathy, support in that group. When the system's failing you and you're not getting a lot of support,
yeah.
that's really, really important to people's survival.
It's
Those groups.
powerful. It's
Yeah.
powerful too, because the medical system, it fails blatantly and there's nowhere for you to go. And then going to the groups, like it feels like there's a lot of risk in it. I don't remember initially doing it myself, but it turned out to be the opposite. Like it seemed a lot more reliable and honest than I mean the doctors I was dealing with, because they just don't have any skin in the game, like I was always
Yeah.
surprised. It's like, oh, do this and do that. And I'd be like, I feel like my life is coming to an end. And you're like, you try this stuff and come back in a couple weeks. And like, I don't think I'm going to make it that long, you know?
Yeah. 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 Because when you've got academia, it's like you're looking at the clock and you're like, I've survived another second. It is that bad. It's like, yeah, it's second by second. I was just like, for some reason, I was like fixated on the clock. I'm like, I'm surviving. 5 minutes more, like I could do another 5 minutes, and it was just so bad. Yeah, yeah, and that's the reality of the difference between your experience and the doctor's assumptions about akathisia and what it is,
Yeah.
Um,
It's
so
like if
yeah,
you turn it into a textbooks type situation, you
yeah,
relinquish this like responsibility to it. You're like, oh, that's what it is. It's, I read about it in black and white. It can't be that bad,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I actually remember kicking off quite badly about because I'd written this complaint to the NHS office, really long complaint, and I complained about the term used to describe akathisia as restlessness. I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah, exactly.
Restlessness. It's like having something like, well, your skin flayed off or being burned alive, or it's awful. It's yeah, and you can't. I suppose until you experienced it, like it's difficult to describe. But restlessness just doesn't quite
Yeah, there's
doesn't
not,
really
it's not adequate at all.
yeah.
Uh, and then there's this other kind of issue of when doctors, and I mean, we're talking about how, flippant and easygoing doctors are with their opinions. And I think
Mm,
part of that is like there's no liability for them. There's no repercussions like when they make mistakes. And my previously I thought that, and I think most people are under this impression that litigation against doctors and is like frivolous. Like there's so much going on. Doctors are sued so much. They have this high,
no.
insurance and stuff. And that they're so worried about their practices and losing their license
Mm,
that they're so careful, and then I got hurt by a doctor and a device, and I'm calling at least 100 lawyers, and I can't get a single one of them to do anything about it. And like I have other experts and other doctors that'll say in black and white that this has hurt me and disabled me, and lawyers still don't want anything to do with it. I'm just like, this is not liability. This is not responsibility. Like then I start hearing other people's stories, and I'm like, oh, these guys, they may tell people that they're under high amount of scrutiny, but they're not under any, and they know they're not under any ultimately, like at
mm.
the end of the day,
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, the law's really if it's accepted practice by a large body of doctors, it's okay, regardless of sort of guidelines. So if it's standard practice to do something, like for example, the problem that people have got with antidepressants, lots of guidance says you should do therapy first. You shouldn't prescribe antidepressants for mild depression. But shouldn't have to be on like for long term. But it's standard practice for people to be on medication for years and years and years.
yeah.
Um,
And that gives
so
them carte blanche to do anything pretty much in that scenario, right? Like,
yeah, yeah, you can do unless you've got a really, unless you're rich and you can afford a barrister. Um,
yeah, I've
then
seen some successful litigation against, um, I think in the States there was one with Zoloft and a few
mm,
others. And when I really looked into the details, it appeared that it was a wealthy or a motivated party. Like the lawyer
mm,
knew the person personally, and they're like, okay, we're going to
mm,
go after it all the way. And then, of course, they were successful, which is the ironic part. Like, even with my case, I'm like, I made my whole case for you. I guarantee you will win. Like, no one can absolutely guarantee it, but any reasonable person, I convince anybody. I could talk to someone for 30 minutes and show them evidence and let someone else talk for 30 minutes, there's no way they're going to side with the other person. Like I have experts, the physics, everything. And yet it only like you have to either pay out of pocket or get a lawyer that is so angry about it that
mm.
he won't let it go. But that's again a fraction of a percent like of litigators out there and stuff. And you see it in the media and it's like this big deal, like it happens all the time, and it never happens. Like there's millions of
No.
people out there that are affected that will never see any justice.
And that's really why you have to sort of be quite, once you realize that, you realize how responsible you are for your own health. I mean,
Yeah.
once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, I went from being quite a healthy person one day to just falling off a cliff,
Yeah.
and then have which in my experience is a bit like what I call like a scales, or like a toxic balance. Like at one point my body's dealing with stuff, the next minute it's not dealing with stuff. I've fallen off a cliff, and it's a very, very long and slippery slope back up,
Yeah.
and I've not gone back up to where I was previously. I'm now disabled. um so but as we were talking before about the studies and stuff being unreliable, so where to go for that information? I mean, I would always say, if you've got a large group of people, thousands of people, who are saying particular things about a drug, and their experiences are entirely consistent, you've got no reason not to take that on board when making your decisions. That's certainly something that I would do. Like if I needed to take an antibiotic, there's certain antibiotics I definitely wouldn't take because of the experiences of other people. I mean, I kind of avoid drugs because I have hypersensitivity. But if I need treatment, then yeah, that is definitely the route I would go down. The least. So that's what's going to be the least harmful for me.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then you just brought something up that we were talking about the other day as well, was that like there's these studies that were done that we look at, and then like they have the sample group is like dozens, sometimes as small as that, or maybe hundreds, but then there's no ongoing study. Like the groups are the ongoing study. Yet, like when a drug or a treatment is turned public, we're now into the biggest and most reliable study out there, and yet no one's documenting it or no one's keeping track. And it's really the groups. And then the groups aren't listened to. Like there's just no one's out there professionally listening to the groups and taking the data out of the groups. But that's a far more reliable, consistent study than any other study ever could be. And yet, as soon as things go public, it's this release of liability and this release of accounting, and we're not recording data anymore. And yet, that's the most critical part of it. And if we did pay attention to that, the data and the numbers and everything we learn, like that would be seriously significant. Like we'd learn
Yeah.
so much more from that.
And I mean, because I watched Dope Sick on the OxyContin
Oh yeah.
crisis, and a lot of those things you've just described came up in that around patient accounts being dismissed as anecdotal. Only those. So the feedback, for the adverse events is only really taken account of if it's reported by a doctor. And we've discussed the problems with that in terms of like opinions. So it's just like it's like this massive merry-go-round. You've got all this data in these groups. It could be really useful for people. If people were willing to engage with it, and you sort of, yeah, it's really, really disheartening because it's like being on a merry-go-round where you see the same sort of injury happening time and time
Yeah.
again.
That's
And
the hardest thing to watch in the groups. Like I have all the information out there on my injury so people can see it, but yet I see this merry-go-round in my group of the people coming in with the same injury over and over and over again, and then doctors will tell me the injury doesn't exist, and then I have to
yeah,
watch, this going on, and it's
yeah,
brutal to watch.
yeah, it's brutal because it could be prevented, and it's been going on for a long time. And I think, like for me, because I've always been in the health profession, So like my thing is always like, well, what can we do to stop this happening to other people? What can we do to prevent it? And come up with an answer other than sort of telling my story, publicizing other people's stories as far as wide as I can. Because we've discussed like the problems with litigation, with different opinions, with a lack of diagnostic procedures, the lack of understanding of what's actually going on. So, and the vast amounts of people that it's affecting. So,
Yeah.
Again, some of them people are also looking at exposure of the problem and how to move it forward. And I think some of the most successful things I have seen are things that are patient driven.
Yeah.
Like in the UK there was a massive petition to the Scottish Parliament, which then fed back into the guidelines for our Cyclone antidepressant withdrawal guidelines. And
Yeah.
that's all patient driven. So you just think, yeah. So I've wrangled with it for a long time, and that's the only kind of thing where I feel like I can make any difference.
Isn't that
Other than
wild that like
my
is
energy
yeah.
into, I just feel like it's a waste of time.
I agree. And it's like the most primitive, right? It's like the most basic, like ancestrally, like we would have this oral tradition of telling stories, like and passing that knowledge on. And like out of all the media we have, all the resources, all the technology and all the everything, like we're trying to communicate the most critical truth that we all have to tell. We have to literally go around and tell each other like face to face in whatever format, and then get together and then try to convince like others, whether it's a governing body or anybody else, of the same thing. And it's just so wild and bizarre to me that that's what's taking place when we have so many tools and so many resources to make it so easy, and yet we can't even accomplish that. We have to, tell our story to everybody for them to believe it, and then just try to pass it around. Like I've been passing around my story for like 5 years.
Yeah.
It's just wild. It's like it's baffling.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast instead of talking to each person one by one, because it's generally the same discussion that I have with people who are new to Akathisia or new to the groups and that. It's pretty much what we've discussed. But yeah, it's sad that it comes down to that in this day and age, but it really does.
Yeah. That's why I started the podcast too. Initially, I told people, like I was trying to tell people what I was doing to heal, and like what happened to me, and like how the injury works. I probably did it hundreds of times, like getting close to that, approaching that. And I was like, I just have to put this into a resource that I can just send to people so they just have access to it. I can't type it out, like every time, or talk it out every time. And yeah, it's wild, but I mean, it's powerful, and that's how we have to do what we do, I guess. And so, like, I'm totally up for it. It's just, I guess it's always been a bit of a surprise, but but then I don't know. The flip side is that we learn so much from each other. I've learned so much from you, and communicating with you and hearing your story and then your perspective, like that has equipped me with kind of wisdom and knowledge, like to understand so many different things, and then communicate all those things to others, and then see the similarity between everybody else's story and my story. I think people oversimplify like our communications and our stories with each other, and the way we think is thinking, oh, they're kind of a conspiracy theorist. They think this harm is out there. It's not really out there. Actually, medicine works really well and all this stuff. But it's a very complex, like hard learned thing. Like the both of us have been doing this for years and years and years. And every step of the way, I've been entirely honest with myself. And it's taken hearing a lot of stories and a lot of details and a lot of similarities and putting those all together to really come up with a cohesive story of like harm that's happening across all these different disciplines and all the vulnerability we have. And like you said, once your health is gone, like that's it. Like there was one mistake. I made one mistake going into the wrong
Yeah.
doctor's office, and then I'm completely disabled, and I've been struggling like to hold on to my existence for 5 years, and I don't know what'll happen for the rest of my life, and
Mm.
the over 30 years before that was great. I could run around, do whatever I wanted every single day and have a good time with no worries. And then that's all it took. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, yeah, it's a life-changing injury, not just for the disability, but also because of the like those set of cultural assumptions you've just mentioned around medicine and stuff that we've all been sort of told is the process. And we want to go against that process. You realise that your voice isn't very accepted. But like this is it overturns all your sort of your beliefs. It
Yeah,
sort of makes you reevaluate all the cultural assumptions that you've had around health, around medicine, around other people, around the way things are reported. Um, yeah.
that was the
So
biggest shocker for me. I was totally like bought in to that everything was safe.
I
There was no worries and everything would always work out. And that was my biggest slap in the face. Was like, hey, you like this, things are really dangerous. I feel more like I'm living like 200 years ago, and like death is lurking for you around every corner, and I'm responsible for my own safety, and I can't trust anybody else with it. It's like totally the
yeah.
opposite of how I was raised. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's really nice to live in that bubble though, isn't it? But we're forced to face the reality that not actually like that. But I just wanted to, because there was a recent study on fluoxetine. So like the usual dose of fluoxetine is like 20 milligrams to 60 milligrams,
mhm,
and there was a radioactive tracer study done of fluoxetine to see how much of the brain it actually occupies at one milligram, and they found that it occupies between 25 and 30% of the serotonin receptors in the brain.
wow.
No, so if you think about, the serotonin isn't just affect mood, it affects a whole range of important biological functions, which strongly correlate with the side effects that people are saying they experience. Are you thinking, well, where so you read a study like that and I think, well, where's these numbers coming from for the usual doses 20 to 16 milligrams,
Yeah.
when 1 milligram is occupying a quarter to a third of the brain and influencing quite an important range of biological functions.
Oh yeah.
So when you read studies like that, that's the sort of thing that makes me question what information I'm trusting, what
Yeah.
information I'm not trusting. So again, it's like you've got the caution from the hypersensitivity, but then you read stuff like that and you think, no, I'm not taking any drugs unless I'm sort of like on Dexter,
Oh yeah.
because it's just reliable. What? Where's that? Where did they get the information about the therapeutic dosing of that drug? It's not from a PET study or any actual biological evidence. I mean, there's been recent studies that the biological basis for depression is been completely overturned. So
That's
you
mind
just think,
blowing to me, because then I would always take the minimum dose, like when I saw a
mm,
psychiatrist, and it always felt like it was too much for me. And so instead of, well, I don't know if they had any ability to drop the dose. I guess I could go to a compounding pharmacy or try to figure something out. But while I told them that I felt overwhelmed by the drug, they would always start raising it and adding drugs, right? And then
Yeah.
I had never, until we spoke, like I didn't even know the percentage that a drug would occupy like that. And that to me, that matches with my experience, which I think is a strong suggestion, right? That, and I've heard other things about, pharma having kind of these minimum dose requirements for, for financial reasons and propagating for that. And that's mind blowing, but it matches my experience.
So because doctors will say, well, that you're on such a low dose, it's not even therapeutic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or, that low of a dose could possibly cause this range of adverse effects. But you look at that and you think it's, because all drugs are derived from toxins. So I just look at that and think it's toxic. I mean, 1 milligram, a quarter of the brain, 60 milligrams. We're 60 milligrams soon to people, so just don't know, do we? So I'm not saying that I definitely know, because obviously I don't. But
yeah,
when you read something like that, it just makes you question what doctors are doing, where they're getting their information from, whether the information is reliable.
It's very suggestive, and I think it matches with a lot of people's experience. I've heard a lot of other people that, and then generally it kind of matches. Like I see my primary experience was blunting, right? Like again, my systems were like overwhelmed, and that's primarily what I see in other people, not what I would expect to see a drug that was effective or like doing something productive, right? It was more of like overwhelming someone's nervous system, to where they were no longer experiencing rumination, anxiety, depression, whatever it was, so it's, to me, it seems like a really strong evidence for for psychiatry kind of doing what psychiatry does, which is like just overwhelming the problem until people kind of are quiet about it or don't, complain anymore.
Yeah, it kind of, and so it kind of makes you reevaluate that, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You think, like you're seeing something, and then there's that sense of being lied to when you see something like that, like when you've been reassured that these things are safe. It's not even a therapeutic dose. A lower dose could harm you. You see a study like that, you think, wow, they don't actually know, and it's meshed with my experience, and it's kind of validating and horrific in the same breath. So I mean, another thing that I wanted to mention, like I mentioned, I was on a proton pump inhibitor for 20 years. So I mean, because one side that I was looking at every single drug that I've been on, or other drugs as well, and that kind of made me understand, clinical trials a bit more. So doctors would say that the proton pump inhibitor will destroy all the acid secreting cells in the stomach to reduce the amount of acid reflux that you experience.
Wow.
So so that's what it does. And so, and that's fine, that's how it works, but that's the only thing that's studied. So none of the other effects of the proton pump inhibitors are studied. But I came across a bit of research done by vets. And vets actually use proton pump inhibitors to reduce the amount of fluid on the brain in dogs that have got hydrocephalus. And I was like, hang on a minute. Do you know what I mean? Hang on a minute. So that just kind of blew my mind a bit. I was like, so what doctors think this drug is doing, which it is doing, Well, that's a significant side effect or non-target effect of the drug
Yeah.
that isn't recognized by human doctors, but is recognized by vets because it has a benefit to their patient, the dog or whatever. And you just think, so I'm like, I've been taking that for 20 years. So you just, so think, like, just because it's labeled as a side effect, so a side effect is sort of been diluted in the language to mean like a bit nausea, headache.
It's something you're experiencing, right? Like it's not telling you like what's physiologically changing for you. It's just
But a side effect comes from the terminology that it's not the effect of the drug that the pharmaceutical one. It's not the target effect. It's an effect that's an aside to the target effect.
yeah.
Which I think is a different in everyday language. Sort of like a side effect has become quite minimized in, the degree and severity that they can take. But given that, like they embrace that side effect of reducing hydrocephalus because it's beneficial.
Yeah.
Whereas other side effects are relatively minimized. So that was just a good example of what I thought of, because if you went to your average doctor and you said, I've got some fluid on the brain, can you prescribe me a blood pump inhibitor? They kind of look you up, I think. So yeah, there's just a difference in perspective based on, experience of different sorts of doctors, because, of course, a vet is as trained as a doctor and, has to interpret non-verbal signals from their clients. So I just thought that was really interesting. An interesting study that kind of sort of really gives an example of why I'm so cautious now.
Yeah. It's very interesting. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that looking at studies is there's a tremendous amount of, which I didn't think was really possible, but philosophy is a different subject than science, but there's a ton of logical fallacy like involved in this stuff. And there's a bunch of omissions, like deception by omission in there. It's like if they don't want you to know something, they just take it out. And then we all kind of tend to think like, oh, ethically they're required to put it somewhere or report it to somebody. But no, if they don't want there's something to see in there, they just take it out. They don't have to show you anything. Then you have to publish a study. Like if a study shows that a drug kills children, like that's just get rid of the study and not publish it and then come up with a different study. It's like people I don't think they tend to scrutinize or analyze things in that way. But I mean, if there's anything they're not saying, it potentially is happening there. Unless they disclose it and say that specifically that it's not happening, or they looked at, this particular consequence of a drug, like it could be totally omitted, or the way they talk about it in lots of cases is deceptive, and then it leads someone to think differently about something and just have an incorrect conclusion about where it is. And that's
I mean, that actually happened with antidepressants. So there was a lot of antidepressants on in healthy people without any sort of history, psychiatric history, and they developed akathisia. And more recently, doctors have been saying that it's not akathisia, that it's unmasked previously unrecognized mania. So they've reclassified. So I mean, once you're in that, like, because there's nothing that you can do. Like they have the power, don't they? The only power you've got is to kind of research and make choices. So I just think, that's sort of like an example of something that's really quite dangerous. Not only are they not listening, they reclassify it as something, in healthy people, a drug effect that can't be accurately or adequately described as reclassified. So yeah, make of that what you will.
Yeah,
Make of that what you will.
it's a perfect example. There's so much stuff, and then there's dropout rates in studies. There's all kinds of stuff that they do
Yeah.
just like that. And I think you really have to be savvy to see it, but I wish more people knew about it. I don't even think doctors know about it, to be honest. Like they read these studies and they
Yeah.
roll with it and they're not applying a high level of scrutiny to it.
No, because they were in exactly the same position that I was in before I had my drug reaction. And they haven't, and that popped that bubble of safety that we were talking about before, because then you sort of like you scrutinize and everything to keep yourself safe, because you need that information. So and in that way, I don't blame them or judge them, but yeah, I mean that again, that's why I say this is the only way forward, because of all these sort of these barriers that we've identified. Yeah, not
Yeah, I agree.
really.
Is there anything else you wanted to discuss or comment on?
I don't think so. I think we've been pretty thorough, haven't we? Really.
Yeah, I think we've done pretty well. Um, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay. All right. See you soon.